Hi, Dawn. Welcome to the Integrative Health Coach Success Podcast.
Julia, thank you so much. It is a pleasure to be here.
Yes, pleasure to have you. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. I've interviewed a few other of the Centurion program attendees, and this is one of the last few. But I have loved getting to know all of you even a little bit more intimately than I have in the program because you're all such unique, amazing individuals. So thank you for being here.
Well, I appreciate that. It's that part of the journey has just been absolutely amazing. What an incredible experience. So I am grateful to have had the opportunity. And you and I have talked a little bit too. I love the fact that there's like a 1 degree of separation between us because the integrative practitioner that I worked with originally was actually somebody that you worked with years ago. So it's really fun. It's kind of like you're like Master Yoda or something like.
Oh, Master Yoda. I don't know. That's awfully generous, Dawn. But it just goes to show you that ripple effect is so real, right? A client became an IHP and she was inspired you to do what you were doing. So it's amazing. Let's start, if you will, by sharing a little bit with our listeners what you're currently doing as an IHP in the wellness space. And then if we can talk about what got you there, kind of your journey to this point, that would be great.
Absolutely. Well, it has been a whirlwind, a true blessing. I am level 2 certified at this time, eagerly anticipating level 3 and high performance health. Those are just 2 that I'm like absolutely dying to get into my, wheelhouse, just with the additional labs and the additional knowledge and longevity and biohacking and all that kind of fun stuff. But right now in my practice, I do have a remote practice. So I'm 100% remote and virtual. And I'm working with a really fun, eclectic mix of clientele, anywhere from children. I think my oldest client is in her 70s at this point. So it's just a variety of different things that people, are challenged with. You and I talked a little bit about the niche concept, and I know we'll probably talk about that as we dive into a little bit more. But yeah, I'm just exercising a full, robust practice, primarily working with people in 4 to 6 month programs, anything and everything from mineral imbalances to hyperactivity, with the kids and stuff like that, to gut related stuff and hormones with women. So, and men too. So it's been a wild ride.
That's great. Yes, we're definitely going to talk about what part of that business, model is kind of important because we hear a lot about niche down, and that it's important. But I think personality comes into play. I think a lot comes into play as to whether or not that's something that would serve you or not. So I can't wait to talk about that with you. What led you to IHP? What kind of got you to this point? Were you always involved in wellness?
So the interesting thing was I've started gravitating really to this space probably about 20 years ago or so, was when my son was a toddler and he was struggling with breathing. And every time at Christmas, literally from the time he was born, every year around that Christmas time frame, I'm in the Midwest, so it gets damp and cold and, snowy and everything. He would have breathing challenges. And there was one winter between the doctor's office and the ER, we had about 5 visits, and I just threw my hands up. I'm like, something is going on. Nebulizer treatments. The one time they couldn't regulate his breathing, he was hospitalized for 3 days. So you start learning about what's going on in asthma related stuff at that age, and so that really was what sparked my journey towards cleaning up, my household, learning about the environment and the products that we're using and stuff like that. And it's funny because I didn't really understand that there was a holistic space. 20 years ago, nobody was really talking about, crunchy or, it was just a matter of cleaning up and getting rid of chemicals was kind of the language. And as things evolved, I would come across people and there was always that standoffishness, like, oh, they're a little woo-woo for me. Right. And I think that's what many people use that, terminology, they're a little too woo-woo for me. And so that was kind of like my mindset. Well, I'm just going to do this now. But I think it starts to just build over time, and what you're exposed to and the more knowledge that you gain. So that really was what precipitated just my fascination and my knowledge and my understanding. And it was just a trickle effect throughout the years. About 14 years ago, 15 years ago, I personally wound up in the hospital. And after 6 months of like poking and prodding and EMGs and EKGs, and I was in the hospital for 3 days. They couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. Thought it was cardiac. They had no clue. And about 6 months later, I had a neurologist who, diagnosed me with an autoimmune condition. And I was like, what's Epstein-Barr? Like, how do we fix this? And at the time, you're still of the mindset in conventional medicine that there's a fix for this, right? There's a pill or there's a fix. And he was brilliant. He was from India. So he very much practiced in modalities of like still just very holistic in nature. He said diet and exercise. So that was the first time that I really had a doctor ever tell me how important diet and exercise and stress management really was. And so as I started, and it's funny because I think a lot of times people, they anchor to a diagnosis, right? Or they anchor to like, well, this is what I've been labeled with. So it just is. Mm-hmm. And I was always the rebel that was like, well, that's not good enough. like, how do I break free from this what is? Because I don't want that label. And so it's the little Italian in me that's like the perpetual rebel. And yeah, just a little bit.
Extra spice, yeah.
So over the past, 14 years, just continued to unpack. I had enough knowledge from my son and then to learn, but it was the high cholesterol, it was all this stuff. I'm like, I'm not going to start taking pills and like, no, I had grandparents that were diabetics. I had 3 grandparents that were diabetics. So in the back of my mind, I always knew that there was something from a longevity standpoint that the genetics were kind of loaded there. And I just didn't want to be that and do that. So I actually started working with, and it was funny, I set out to prove a point. I was in the corporate world. I was in sales and marketing. I was an executive. I've always been in the sales arena in some capacity or another. I started doing a lot of life coaching in tandem with, helping sales teams, do as far as performance and that were concerned. And I set out to prove a point because I was working with a specific company at the time doing weight loss and supplements. And I wanted to show a friend that you could do this naturally, right? And that people were over exercising and over supplementing. And so it kind of was like my life collided with my business at this juncture. And that was back in about 2016, 2018. And I was taking the knowledge that I had, the experience, the personal stuff that was going on in my world, but also trying to maximize the possibility of what could my, physiological transformation look like? What could my health look like if I really just dialed things in? And so that's when I reached out to a dear friend of both of ours. And I said, listen, I'm working with these products. I want to prove a point to a friend of mine. I want to train alongside, she trained fitness competitors at the time. And I said, but I want to do this holistically. I want to do it all natural. I don't want to over exercise. And that just started this whole spiral. She was becoming an integrative health practitioner. I literally had a transformation of a lifetime and I wasn't over exercising. And I'm an athlete. I've been an athlete since I've been 5 years old. I've played multiple sports. I coached high school sports, so this was fascinating to me that you could really transform somebody's life, their body, their health, and do it from that capacity. And so ever since that experience with her, I've been like a Dr. Cabral, junkie. I'm like listening to everything, absorbing everything, like just immersing myself into the world, like buying every single book I can. And there was a tipping point. There was one particular client, and it was in December of 22. And she came to me and she said, I bought all these supplements. Can you help me figure everything out? And she had spent about $500 to $600 worth of supplements. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, why did you buy all this stuff? And I walked into my husband's office. I said, I'm done. I'm done. I'm done with the sales and marketing side of this. People are playing Russian roulette with their health. They're taking all of these products. They don't know what's, counteracting what. They have no clue if they really need it. They're spending ridiculous amounts of money, and I'm done. And I signed up for Dr. Cabral's program, like literally within days after that. I was just like, we're going to do this different. And so that's a long story, but here we are. And it was just, like I said, it's been this perfect storm of like my personal experiences, my world, my personal life experiences, and then having seen the other side of things, having seen the corporate and the sales and the marketing side of products that are out there and companies that are out there, and anybody will sell you anything, I mean, they really truly were. I met with a friend this morning, and I am so passionate about people using the right things and not over consuming products that are out there, and really learning to listen and honor their bodies, because there's such a synergy and such a beauty behind just being in relationship with your body. And really learning to listen to what it's saying to you, and not trying to constantly put these Band-Aids and these masks on, symptoms that you're having. So,
yes. Yeah, I could not agree more. I think we're unfortunately living in a culture where it is very Band-Aid focused, even if it's holistic, right? We're taught to look outside of ourselves for every solution. Even, sometimes like, I need therapy, I have to fix myself. Maybe you need to start breathing and take a walk. Like, let's start there.
Right.
We're just constantly. Yeah. And sometimes we can even get too hardwired to think that like we are this broken project that we need to keep fixing. And oftentimes if like, it's just the foundations, like I always tell, if you're not breathing, sleeping, or moving, forget it. Right. Like those have to be, then it's eating, but our body has this like hierarchy of what it needs.
Right.
Not 15 billion supplements when you're not doing the foundations.
Exactly.
Oftentimes clients, people who are in the health, they're interested in health and wellness, right? They need an advocate. They need someone to direct them and almost give them permission to focus things a little simpler sometimes, right? Yes, there's clients that need all the things and the protocols, and that's the stuff that is meaningful. But a lot of people really need the focus of the de-stress protocol and the foundational supplements. And then you see what's left over, right? But someone who presents, $600 worth of supplements, like my guess is probably 100 of them were necessary. And the rest was like, oh my gosh, we're band-aiding things that movement, sleep, proper nutrition could handle.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's sad to watch. And it's one of those things that just kind of, when I look at things now, and I'm talking to another practitioner or somebody who's considering even IHP, I ask them, what's your discontent? Like, what is the thing that's really perpetuating this drive for you? Because if you can anchor on to that, I call it my holy discontent. Like, what is that passion point for me that's driving me to want to make a difference for humanity, And, we talked about, kids and stuff like that. And that's a passion project for me. If I had the ability to honestly serve kids and do it completely for free, like that would be like down the road, like how could I get there, right? That serving kids at the level at which I would love to serve them would be just a dream come true for me. Because, I mean, there's so many things that they're exposed to. And looking back 20 years now, there's a lot of things that I would have done different, as a parent, but we didn't know.
Yes. Yeah. You can only do what you can with what you know. And
Yeah.
I think, certainly, you're in the right space, right? When you're talking about how much it would fulfill you to do free work, a passion project, right? Gosh, you're doing the right thing at that point. And I always say my passion project would be like underprivileged moms that financially can't afford it, because I believe that there's so many women out there that would do things differently if they only had the information. But the information, there's a sense of privileged information. I think there's kind of this hierarchy of, are you privileged enough to have access to this information? Oftentimes, right? And I would go to places where I know that this information isn't so readily available.
Right.
And I believe that there's so many women who would do things differently. And you're right. Kids are just, it's cliche or what, but they're the future. If we continue to poison and go at the rate of illness that children, obesity, all of that chronic disease, if we continue at that rate, I mean, we are going to have a population of adults in 30 years that are incredibly ill.
Yeah, having been a single mom for about 5 years, I can appreciate that, because it was challenge. Dollars are stretched and they can only stretch so far. And I worked with a few moms that have kids that struggle with diabetes, right? Or are borderline diabetic. And it's easy for them to go into a store and look at a label and say, oh, it has this many grams of sugar, as opposed to like a pint of strawberries. Like, how many? It doesn't have a panel on it that tells you how many grams of sugar, but it's strawberries. It's the better pick. Yeah. And like you said, just that education, this is a lot more cost effective. We just need to help and educate you as to what is the right portions, what are the right picks, what are the right, solutions to help you with the child, that's struggling with that, whatever it is, X, Y, Z. And, it becomes convenience. It becomes, cost, it becomes, awareness at the end of the day is really what it comes back down to. How can we better equip and educate and help, moms, and kids? They are the next generation. And so how are, where are their minds? They, even work with several teenagers in my practice. And I always tell them, I said, you have direct access to me. You have questions, let me know, because it's that bridging that gap with that age group, because they're, if mom tells me to do it, I'm not going to do it. But letting them know that they have direct access to me has been a really big piece to the puzzle for them. And so they'll text me, they're texters, that age range. Yeah. And, we talk about screens at night, and I help to educate them on what really is happening. And if you want to do this, like, it's that whole, let's make a deal. You have to play with, that age range. But I love that age group. I really, truly do. And the more we can equip them and educate them, they become the next parents, the parents of the next generation, right? And they're much more rooted in foundations, like you were talking about a moment ago. That girlfriend that stopped this morning, I said, none of this works if you're not, addressing what's going on with your adrenals. That middle-aged woman, like, you really need to focus on those adrenals and stuff like that. And she goes, well, what about this walking thing I hear about? So they're starting to get that little bit of information trickled. And that, as a practitioner, is the most important piece to the puzzle. It's sometimes those things that you don't think are relevant. You want to talk about, the hair tissue mineral test, or you want to talk about like the hormones and all this fascinating things that we learn about. But it's the foundations. And as that information starts to trickle out there and people start to grasp hold of, like, oh, that's realistic. She's like, oh, I can get 10,000 steps in a day. That's like easy, a no-brainer, but they don't realize how important it is. So as we start to communicate and really create and curate, education out there, take them on your journey with them or with you. Like, what are you learning about? What are you implementing into your life? Because there's so many different things people can be doing to biohack, between like ice baths, I did my ice baths this morning and, the castor oil and the grounding. And like, people are like, oh my gosh, it could be overwhelmed for a lot of people. It really has to go back to just the baby steps, the basics, and implementing one new thing a week or one or two new things that you feel like you can handle. That's my favorite place to start with clients.
Yes. Yeah. What's this with walking? Oh, you mean our primal source of movement since the beginning of time? Oh, yes. It's good for you.
Yeah.
Okay. What I would love to chat about next, because I think for a lot of personalities, coaches listening, it could really resonate. And it's this idea of, yes, while niching down almost can be really important, maybe even in the beginning, more important in the beginning, oftentimes practices can kind of evolve. I don't know about you, but I would meet with a woman about her hormones, and then she'd be like, oh my God, I have like my daughter, and can you help my daughter? Or my husband, can you help him? Or, my friend, she's not in, perimenopause, but she wants to get pregnant, right? You end up kind of like creating a little bit more of this wider cast the more you start working with people. And I would love to know your personal approach to the idea of, clients that you're working with and on that topic. What is your stance on that?
Yeah, it's funny because it was something that I really struggled with, that whole mindset of I want to work with everybody. I want to help everybody, and I think that's normal. But I do know who my avatar is. I do know her hair color. I know her name. I know her age. I did all the work. The funny thing is, like you said, that avatar comes with 4 kids and a husband. And she's that mom that's really advocating on behalf of her whole family, right? So as you start to work with other people, the kids, you get really passionate, really entrenched, really just immersed with their well-being because you're a mom too, right? For those people, those practitioners that are parents, they're going to understand that. You become emotionally invested in that. But she also is advocating for her husband who could afford to lose, 40 pounds. And he is a type 2 diabetic and he doesn't take care of himself. And, he's the breadwinner. And she's really passionate about her marriage and her husband's health. So I have found, as I really thought and know who my avatar is, that she comes with, for me, it's a she, Samantha is her name, but she comes with all of these other variables that are family and relatives and friends. And those become the next phase of your practice, right? Those are your referrals in your practice. And so I think everybody has a passion point that, a person that they love to work with, that's their ideal clientele. And I'm kind of testing it out for myself. I created and here's how it evolved for me. I knew who she was and I knew who I wanted to work with, right? And as I started working with the kids, I really became entrenched with that and wanted to do that as a passion project. But then what happened for me was I started to enter a new phase myself, as a middle-aged woman. All of a sudden, I'm working with hair tissue mineral tests, and I love mineral imbalances. I love the entire spectrum of, metals and molds and toxicity. And, give me all those clients. Like that was my creative parasite. Like give me all those people. Like I love that type of project work, right? I'm an analytical. I love quantitative data. I love lab tests. But what was happening for me physiologically was entering like that whole perimenopausal stage. So I had to learn about, and I'm still learning about hormones. And that was the last thing I wanted to work with.
But Samantha eventually ends up going through perimenopause.
Right. So as much as I was kind of reluctant, that wasn't my wheelhouse. It wasn't my sweet spot. I'm becoming fascinated with it because it's what's happening in my deck of cards. And I'm having to unpack and navigate this new journey. So And again, like you said, Samantha's growing up too. So I'm seeing more Samanthas that are now like 10, 5, 10 years down the road. So I think there's value in knowing where you want to start. Right. But being open and fluid to also understanding that your people will find you. Your passions may change, your interests, your curiosity may change through this process. And that just, it broadens the scope of your influence. At the end of the day, it's impacting more people's lives and taking more people on this wellness journey, right? And you can only do that if you allow yourself to be vulnerable and open and constantly growing. I have an adage I always say, you're either green and growing or ripe and rotting. And I always want to be that person that's green and growing in this space and learning as much as I possibly can. I don't think you ever stop learning. So yes, there's a lot of value in understanding who that avatar is, and, really grounding yourself and getting really good at one thing, but then also being fluid and knowing that may change, and that's okay. That totally is okay.
Yes. And embracing the flexibility to, while you don't need to work with people that you don't want to work with, understanding that, oftentimes, like, a lot of people, they like variety. They can't stand reading the same test over and over again. Right. So you want the variety. And so knowing your personality, knowing what kind of makes you tick, knowing what is supports clients, right? If you're working with Samantha and she has 4 kids, and part of Samantha's really high stress is worrying about her kids' health issues, guess what's going to make Samantha better?
Right.
Helping her kids, right? So it's one of those things where when you understand nuances of how things evolve, and you can kind of see the world in a, when we first were talking about what we were going to chat about, you said the words black and white. When you see the world in colors of gray instead of so black and white, you're able to shift your focus in a way that really supports you, but also supports the people that you can help. And we're all in the business of wanting to make an impact, and why not have the flexibility of, if things shift, being open to, wonder where this will go. And like you said, being more fluid to the waves along the way.
I think when you expand your knowledge that way, it serves the next client, though, because I've seen that trickle effect, working with one client. He had gout, and he's been dealing with the ramifications of that for like 15 years now. And he just wanted to play golf again. That was like a big priority for him. And the more I explored and learned about that, and we dove into his tests, it was ironic because there was a ripple effect with another client I was working with, that I came across something in that research that I stopped and went, oh my gosh, I wonder if, right? So you're able to start to connect, and bridge knowledge gaps when you open yourself in that capacity, because you can serve the next client at a whole different level because you've been exposed to so much more.
Yes. Yep. And again, if at the end of the day, if impact and serving is our biggest mission, the education piece, the never stop learning. And I love how you said, when you're going through a different phase right now, you're almost, I joke with one of my friends, like, the universe, God, whatever your kind of divine power is, it is definitely like, you will learn about perimenopause and menopause, no matter how much you struggle with fertility. We're going to make you figure this one out. And it's a little bit of my own journey, but it's a lot of the clients that I'm seeing. And at my age, I'm like, I'm not going back. I am going that way. And it's kind of forcing me to learn about things that I didn't really want to learn. I love hormones, but my passion was always fertility and, cycle health and all of that. But a whole big missing piece of that. And I believe that where we're falling short in the research certainly is with perimenopause and menopause, and where a lot of women are misunderstood and missupported. I remember my own mom. I can remember back to times where, like, she was a raging lunatic. And I think back, My God, she was probably just going through insane hormone fluctuations,
Hmm.
and no one knew how to support it at that point in time. And my dad would be like, "Steer clear of your mom." Um, but my gosh, like to think back
Yeah.
to that and think that she went through that with very little support.
Hmm.
She was like, you didn't go to the doctor and like ask for estrogen at that. It was just wasn't, she said a lot of her friends weren't doing it. So I think it's something that the world needs more support on, as obviously a
I
lot of
agree.
these Samanthas, right? If
Hmm.
I was doing this 15 years ago, a lot of the women that I was working with for fertility are moving to that point too.
Yeah.
And it's the next generation of, I think, really well-minded women that are looking for peri and
Yeah.
menopausal support.
Well, and what I'm finding too is it's not linear. It's not just one solution, like everything else that they've dealt with, right? Uh, it's it's multifaceted. You're dealing with adrenals, or is it your progesterone? Is it your estrogen? Right. So it's not okay. It's just one fix. For everybody. Again, it's that bio individuality that we come back to, and the same thing. I was like, oh, wait, you mean I don't have to have hot flashes? Oh, wait, you mean I don't have to, and I can successfully say, like, I haven't now. I was getting hot flashes. Like, I'm like, what is that? And you don't realize what they are until you realize what they are. And all of a sudden they're upon you and you're like, no. But I've been able to successfully get rid of them for almost 2 months now, and I haven't had one, which is like, okay, that's a big win for me. Now it's a matter of, everything else. But when women realize, like genetics, right? But that they don't have to be at the mercy of these symptoms that they're most familiar with, that our moms or grandmothers endured, during that stage, they're like, what do you
Mhm.
mean I don't have to deal with all those symptoms?
Yeah.
Wait, what? That's the fascinating, rewarding part of what we do, is being able to change that mindset and educate them from what they thought or were familiar with. And it's almost kind of like it's just this awakening, and just this excitement and energy, and to give a woman a new lead. I've always said this, whether it's 10 pounds and fitting into her favorite pair of jeans, or helping her child, if you give a woman a new lease on life and set her free, where she's feeling amazing in her own body, like, she can do incredible, remarkable things.
Mhm.
But when you're feeling trapped in your body, like you have no control over it, there's nothing more defeating or frustrating. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. And that like ties back to like the flexibility of like, if she is a mom, if she is, a wife, and she's not, showing up as her best self, right? It's going to affect the kids, or it's going to
Yeah.
affect her marriage. And so the ripple effect of, being able to support people that can support her and vice versa
Yep.
is so impactful. And yes, while I think having a vision for what you want for your business and who your ideal avatar client is, being able to remain flexible and remain, gray, have an understanding of the gray area, I think it brings a lot of reward, because you're able to
Yeah.
see a lot come to fruition in your client's life.
Yeah. I think there's even more reward when you start to impact the things around her life. That, like you said, that mom, when you can help her children,
Mhm.
and it's freeing for her. I've seen it repeatedly. I would say, honestly, probably 60 to 70% of my clientele has turned into working with the kids and or the spouse. Just because of the impact you're making on their life, and their trust and their faith in you, and having the ability to work with the kids. And that's just really awesome. It's really incredibly rewarding to make that much of an impact in her life, that you're helping her family now. I can't even begin to describe how that feels.
Mhm. Yes.
I
Well,
can't.
because you're a mom, and
Yeah.
um, that really, my mom actually has a saying where she says, you're only as happy as your least happiest kid. She would say, she would call and check on me and be like, all right, is everything okay? And I'd be like, Mom, I'm fine.
Oh,
But the truth is so much, and not in this codependent way, right? In this just biological, maternal way. When your kids are thriving, it is such a place of peace. And so if you can have a mom put her oxygen mask on and then help her with the things in her life, like her children, that are an intricate part to her just happiness overall, it is. And it's rewarding because you know what that love entails. You know what all those feelings are. You know what it's like to sit in a hospital room with a child who can't breathe, and you're able to kind of give these women what you wish you had, right? Which in a way can heal us. It can heal that piece of us that might have guilt or regret or, oh my gosh, how could I not have? And you're able to kind of just heal that through supporting others.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So powerful.
Yes. Yeah, it really is. If our listeners want to kind of connect with you further, find out more, where are all the places that you show up, either websites or social media?
Absolutely. My website, dawnplatz.com. Social media, you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, all over the place. Pinterest even. I have a lot of fun stuff that I'm building in my Pinterest portfolio, even for my clients, for ours, foods and resources and different things like that. But yeah, Instagram and Facebook are definitely my go-tos.
That's great. Thank you so much for being a guest on the Integrative Health Coach podcast. This was such a great conversation. Again, such a pleasure getting to know you more and bringing your unique wisdom to our listeners.
Grateful. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Dawn. Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.